us today. Beth, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Absolutely. I am Beth Housewert and I run Inspired Impact. I do museum consulting for emerging museums and new museum professionals to get a jump start on their industry knowledge. And I'm so excited to be here today.
Hey, Jennifer Whitburn of Jennifer Whitburn Exhibits. I have been independent for about 4 years now. I am an exhibit designer with like an architecture and media education background. I worked prior to being independent. I was about 15 years with Ralph Applebaum Associates working on projects like the National Museum of African American History, Arctic Studies Center in Alaska. So cultural projects where I was kind of the interface between architecture and exhibits. And I'm so excited to be here and be part of this community, and I will pass it on to Erin.
Hey everybody, I'm Erin Richardson. My consulting firm is called Frank and Glory. I work with museums on their what's typically called permanent collections. I call them core collections because nothing is permanent. And I've been doing this specific work for about 8 years. I've been in the field since the mid-1990s and mostly worked with museum collections. Yeah, I'm excited to learn from you all and share some tips that I've learned through mostly growth opportunities.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cashmere. I run a design agency out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. We design interactive exhibits for children's museums, art, history, science museums, but we also do marketing and branding. If you're running an exhibition and you need like a brand identity or marketing collateral, we handle that kind of stuff as well. I've been independent on and off for the past decade. I have held a W-2 job for different museum firms within that time, but I've been independent again for the past 2 years almost, and I'm happy to be here and meet everybody today. And we have a fun program, and I'm excited for y'all to learn some today. Let's get started. So before we roll into what we're going to present about, I want to talk a little bit about IMP. We are an independent museum professional group, a network of consultants and freelancers who work in all areas of the museum field and all different kinds of museums. Our network provides a central hub of resources, knowledge, and connections. We actively work to support independent museum professionals, strengthen the relationship between independent museum professionals and museums, and advance the museum field. If you're interested in getting involved with us, we'll have some information at the end of this session. But as we get started, please use the chat to introduce yourself. We hope that you meet some great people during this session, and we want you to be able to connect.
So this group, the group of co-hosts, was noticing online on the listserv a lot of questions being asked, like, what do I do? I'm having issues with scope creep, and I'm having issues with, clients calling me at night. And there was a lot of questions about establishing clear responsibilities. And so we were in a planning meeting when we were talking about upcoming sessions, and we thought, let's do something to address the questions that have been coming up and help folks, help empower our community of clients and kind of gather resources that we have to help support and establish, what is the essential elements to establish a clear understanding between an IMP and a client, and what are tools that we can use for that. And these are the questions that are going to be part of the breakout. And so I encourage you to think about them as you hear some of what we're sharing, because I'm sure that you all will have things that we can add to it. And then we can share that out with the bigger IMP community as resources. Next slide. So in kind of thinking through how we might group or talk about these the resources and tools, we kind of established 3 buckets, right? So there's kind of this logistical bucket, right? Like establishing a letter of agreement, which is kind of your basis of the contract, logistical. So I will be talking about logistical. And then there's also planning aspects, right? Like, how do you establish your meetings, your kickoff, how do you plan for the process to establish clear communications throughout the whole design process and planning process. And so Beth is going to speak to that. And then in terms of social, So establishing norms and agreements. How are we gonna establish our you know, how we communicate with each other, and what will be our tools? And Erin will talk about that. Next slide. So to get into kind of the logistics, in advance of doing a letter of agreement, and I want to acknowledge that everyone is kind of probably coming from different spaces. We've set this up for folks who might not have ever created a letter of agreement, and might be responding to their first RFP as an independent museum professional. So it's kind of very basic. So forgive if there's some things that are obvious, but we want to kind of provide basic information. In advance of the letter of agreement, you might be responding to an RFP. You might have a direct connection or recommendation to a client. So typically, in my practice, I would first have kind of a visual proposal that's more, you know, highlighting the work that I've done in the past and making it relevant to their project. And then as a follow-up, once that's accepted and it seems like we're on the same page, then I follow up with a letter of agreement. And this is kind of the outline of the letter of agreement. And it's more of a, you know, of a document. It's kind of has all of the things that you might need to, that then you will need to walk through with them, because some of it is language that's kind of protecting you from future situations. And so this is kind of the outline of what you might want to consider including in your letter of agreement. Each project is specific and unique, so it would need to be altered. And we will share either in the chat link, we can share of kind of a live document that you can use as a template. First item is project description. So there you want to include the clients, the owner's bigger vision, right? Their project goals, the location, the size, all of the details that are kind of established in the RFP or from their website, from the bigger kind of agenda of the project, the bigger project. And then B, your scope, specifically what you're going to work on. And you want to include there the interrelationship with the client team and what they're doing when you clarify your scope in terms of like clarifying cutoff lines or handoffs. You want to include, you want to mention what the inclusions, what you're including specifically, and what would be exclusions, things that are scope that would be considered ad service, and clarify those under the scope description. For deliverables, you want to outline your delivery dates and exactly what will be provided in each of those delivery dates. And in the project schedule, include the dates for those deliveries, as well as key milestones for information that you will need from the client that ties to then what you're providing as a deliverable. So they can see upfront the interrelationship between what things that, content that they may be providing that then gets incorporated into the design process and provided out. Also, phase duration should be included so that then when you're talking about fee, you could include either, if it's an RFP where there's a fixed fee per phase or a fixed fee overall, I still recommend that you include an estimate of hours, right? And include an hourly rate for anything that would be considered outside. So that's upfront and already on the table. So that if down the road scope or fee changes, that's already been established. And then in terms of expenses, you can establish an allocation for the overall project of how much you think will, what's a max allocation for expenses. And you could specify that any additional expenses would get approved. So if you're going to go on a flight, that you would get that approved, but that you're establishing upfront that there's an allocation for the number of trips and the number of flights, or you're estimating that upfront as a max, and then having those approved in advance and billing monthly along with your monthly invoices. For payment schedule, yeah, I mentioned the monthly invoicing. That's for kind of a larger project. establishing monthly payments that where you would include any expenses is good for long-term projects. For smaller projects, it might be more delivery based, where you're providing, you're going to do a report, and that report is the deliverable, or draft, maybe a draft report is a deliverable, and then the report after getting feedback and incorporating it might be 2 deliverables, and you could bill at both. And all of those things really factor into what your comfort level is with and what's specific for you in terms of ease for paperwork and reduction, and what's your priority? Do you want to have the more regular things, or do you want to have less paperwork in terms of invoicing and such? We'll establish what range you set up. And then in terms of the changes, we've all been on projects where there can be different types of changes. So general, substantive, timing changes, suspensions, that's all outlined in the doc that we're going to be sharing. So I won't get too much into detail but basically you want to establish what's going to happen if they, for example, put the project on hold because of something internally that's happening there. Do you want to ask for, do you want to upfront ask for, if there's going to be a pause, a retainer fee, a small fee that would be established to keep you on hold on the project. That would be a base minimum fee that they're paying to keep you available, for a later date. And I think I haven't been able to implement that, but I think it's a great thing to try for, especially if it's with a client that you think might have issues with delays or stops. And you want to establish how you will address those types of changes and adjustments in project. And then probably most importantly is client responsibilities, right? So you want to establish expectations with regard to review periods, and expectations with regard to scope that they're providing that's going to impact your schedule, and have that very clearly delineated upfront in the client responsibilities. Having a key single point person is good, and that Erin will talk about later in socials. And then finally, in terms of ownership, you want to just establish upfront your agreement on how you will be credited and attribution will be made. And that's kind of the gist of it. It's a lot, and we'll talk about it more in the next session. So I will pass off with that.
Before we move on to Beth, I'm going to drop your link in the chat real quick.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very draft and working document. Hopefully will be helpful for folks if you haven't done a letter of agreement before.
Actually, Cashmere, I've done that.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome.
Right.
Awesome. Kickoff meetings. Ugh. I love it that Jennifer goes first and she gets take care of all the logistical, all the formal stuff, because that really sets the stage for the fun to happen. For me, I love a good kickoff meeting because it's usually in person. If it's not in person, it is the gathering of all the people that are working on the project virtually. So whether you're having it on site with a great tour accompaniment or things like that, or it's just a nice virtual meeting, it's essential that you have that kickoff meeting. It really does start the project and gets everybody on the same page, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So really what this session is all about is having those clear understandings, and getting everybody there with the kickoff meeting is how we're going to get started. So at every kickoff meeting, we're going to start with an agenda, because there's lots of reasons why to do the agenda. Not just it's standard, it's what we do, but it's also creating leadership for your meeting. It's letting your client know that you got this, that you are in charge and they hired you for a reason. You're having a good, glowing first step in this agreement, and that you're taking charge. So you have an agenda that's set up for your kickoff meeting. It gives these timed expectations of what is it gonna be for us just today, just for this meeting. How long is it going to take? And what are we actually going to focus on? And that's so important. It also gives you a nice opportunity to have a timekeeper, so that if you do need to redirect the conversation a little bit, you can say, hey, we really want to get out on time today, and we've got about 10 minutes to talk about this section. So let's keep our thoughts nice, short, and sweet so that we can get to that 10-minute mark. So, which is nice. And then the last one there was one more that was, you got to have a clear understanding of the day. Clear, easy redirection. Oh, I looped that right in there, Cashmere. You're right on it. I love it. I love it. All right. So now we're going to talk about what to include in that agenda. We talked about the why and why we should have it, but now what should it look like? The agenda for your kickoff meeting should always have introductions and roles within the project. You might have your marketing team there. You might have your education team there. But are they actually doing those tasks in the project? Is your marketing team also going to be in charge of providing all visuals and blurbs? Now you know exactly who to talk to. Is your education team wearing multiple hats and also is available for tours? So always good to clarify that. Overview the project. Jennifer talked in about the LOAs, that's going to give you really like a formal understanding of what it is. And that's between the point people, between you and the point person on the site. But make sure everybody else in the room understands the overview of the project. It clarifies for everybody, gets them on the same page, and also it might give you the opportunity to restate what they've said in their organizational jargon in your way to clarify, to say, so from what I've heard you say, the grand plan of this project is to XYZ. Oh yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. And you put that so poignantly. So that's really nice. You talk about expectations for your experience, your content, your outcome. What is the ultimate where this would be utopia? One of the things that I love to ask is, if I called you a year from now, if I called you 2 years from now, what do you hope that you can tell me about this project? Because that not only is going to talk about logistics, it's also going to talk about the feel in which they're hoping for when the project is successfully completed. So go ahead and steal that one. If I call you in a year, what are you going to tell me about this project? I love that one. Then we're also going to talk about evaluation of the current offerings, because we know that there's stuff going on that's not working. And that's why they called you in, because you have all the answers and you're the expert. Or at least they think that. We're going to get there. We absolutely are. But you have the guideline over here in the bumper of what they expect you to do. Why not ask them what they don't want you to do, what they don't want as a result? If you've read, what is it? Creating a story brand, they talk about the villain. And what is the villain for them? What is it that they don't want? So have that comparison to create bumpers on either side of the project, of the yeses and the nos. All right, next up, we're going to talk a little bit about scheduling your future meetings. This is so important to create an understanding of what comes next in the team. Sometimes this is done in the kickoff meeting. Sometimes the lead person is going to work alongside with you to really break down the meeting schedule. But 3 important things. One is that you always have to have the right people in the right room for the right part of the project. There is no need for the entire team to be at every single meeting. No. They will get exhausted. They will start to zone out. They're not going to listen. So make sure that you kind of work with your lead, that only the right people are in the room at the right time, and they're all there. Then we have to talk about consistency and predictability. It is so much easier for me to say I have an every Tuesday at 2:00 meeting for this project. I can get myself ready. I get into a routine every Monday morning. I'm going to review the content. Every Wednesday, I'm going to time block a little bit of time to do the action items from the meeting. There's predictability, and it's also way easier to schedule. Maybe that first, second Tuesday, part of the team can't make it, but I bet you by the third, fourth, and fifth second Tuesday, they will have scheduled around it because they know it's coming. So consistency and predictability on that one. The last one is about evaluation. And this is a little clue as to what we're going to talk about next month. Evaluation is so, so important because you're not just talking about the evaluation of the project that's going on. You're talking about the evaluation of the process on which you as the consultant and your client are going through to get to the end result. If you schedule that midpoint, then you can course correct. Hey, maybe using text or Slack just isn't working for everybody. Well, now let's switch that. And Erin's going to talk more about that. But also you can say, we've had some really weird email glitches and we're switching email servers. Now we have to find another way. Is my frequency of check-ins good and well with the project? Really think about the logistics of the consulting agreement, not the product. Yes, we may have budgetary issues. Something didn't get approved. Now we're going to have to push the product scope of work different. That's not what you're talking about in the evaluation, or at least not this part. And then, of course, the final evaluation is important to schedule as well, because that's going to give you your final results. Hopefully some really glowing testimonials, things like that. And it's already on the schedule and they will be prepared and ready to give you that feedback. So those are all these amazing good kickoff meetings. But we know that even with the formal LOA and an agenda-driven kickoff meeting, there's all kinds of other social things that are mixed up inside there. So Erin's going to talk to us a little bit about the social agreements that happen outside of all of this formal stuff.
Hi, everybody. So before I start, I want to just give a shout out to my colleague, Aria Camioni-Lind, who is runs Aria Strategies. I learned some of this stuff from her and also like modified it as I went along. So social agreements in the project really are about a couple of things. How are we going to treat each other during the work we do together? How are we going to communicate? Who is part of this, like who participates in communication? And what kind of tools are we using in the project for communication, but also for some other things? So a big deal about social agreements are meeting norms. And when someone was like, oh, let's do some meeting norms, I was like, are you kidding? What is this? Is for like non-adults. It is the most helpful thing. I can't tell you how, like they have saved projects from disaster. So not for all projects, but for larger projects that are going to involve significant change and where I can already tell from the preliminary phone conversation I've had with the client that they're like, people do not get along. And part of the reason they're having a consultant come in is because they need like a third party, like an arbitration situation, right? So the meeting norms are so important, especially for that kind of thing. So you can, I always develop them as a group, not at the kickoff meeting, but at the first like work session or formal meeting for the project. Then we pull them back out at the beginning of every meeting And I try to get some kind of physical reaction from people, like, are we all gonna, do we feel like we can participate in this meeting using these meeting norms that we all agreed on? And I try to get like a thumbs up or a digital thumb or something, a nod, a yes, just so that everyone has committed to this. And the reason I do that is because it's a lot easier to call people on their garbage behavior if they just 15 minutes or so ago said that they were not going to interrupt people. So examples of meeting norms from different projects, I always let the group develop meeting norms. Like I rarely say anything. I'm like, how do we want to treat each other when we're in meetings? And they usually come up with all this. So some of the more recent ones, we're always going to have an agenda. We're going to follow the agenda. Sometimes they want to rotate moderators, and the moderator is the person who's like, okay, you just interrupted so-and-so, FYI, like they're the person charged with, calling everybody on norm violations. But it's one of them, it's not me. I'm not telling the client what to do. Like they're helping each other. So no interrupting, talking over, often using I statements. Many projects I've been in, somebody from collections is telling the educator what they're supposed to be doing. And that is a guaranteed like meeting derailer right there. So talk about yourself and not about other people, whether they are or are not in the room. If you are doing a hybrid meeting or a virtual meeting, sometimes if you're just in a really big room of people, it is sometimes very helpful to state your name before you start speaking. If you have somebody who's called into a virtual meeting and they don't have access to the screen, they can't see who's talking, it's just nice to have somebody state your name. If you have people who are visually impaired, they might have their Zoom screen up, they might be on the screen. That doesn't mean that they have visual access to your name or your face. It's just nice to say who you are. You may want to have a norm about using your digital hand or in some other way waiting to be recognized. Like how are you going to run the meeting? Sometimes that's not the corporate culture of wherever you are. Like sometimes it's just everyone threw everything in the table and we all talk over each other, and that's how it goes. Like, and you as the consultant is probably may be unlikely to change that 25-year organizational behavior for one project. But sometimes, some stuff just doesn't fly, but it's good to have this, get this out on the table to begin with. Depending on the content or topic of the project and your audience and the people who you are working with, it is sometimes imperative that before each meeting you restate and like reaffirm that you are going to defer to or prioritize the impacted community for this exhibition project, that experts with lived experience, often that is how, if you need to flip the script on who gets the most airtime in a project, this is where you can help make sure that happens. Okay, next slide. Okay, then we have another social agreement is a project agreement, right? And this is less about our behavior, but more about a mindset for the project. Most of my projects involve some kind of significant change. And as Beth mentioned, evaluation of your current offerings is happening here. Like it's not up for debate that we're going to look at what you're doing now. I try to help, I try to not take on projects where somebody wants me to come in and fix this, but don't change anything while you're fixing it. And that's not a combo that works for me. It doesn't actually work, period, but it definitely doesn't work for me. So often project agreements are, centered around letting helping people be comfortable with change and not shooting the messenger in a meeting when, somebody throws out an idea for something that might impact a specific department or a certain job description. And, these project agreements will help, the registrar not lose their shit in the meeting where we talk about like a community collecting event, right? Because when you're like, oh, we'll just have people bring stuff into the museum, and the registrar is like, no, that's a nightmare of documentation. We're not doing it. Like, we're throwing everything on the table. That is a project agreement. That's what we're doing. We all agree to this at the beginning. So some project agreements are like accepting uncertainty and imperfection. Oftentimes I'm working with a group of staff who've literally never undertaken a project of this type before. So this work is new to everyone in the room except me. So they are coming in with no experience. And so they're learning and they're building muscles around this work, and they're not going to do it perfectly right out the gate. And it's important to allow time and space to learn by making mistakes, but they need to also let each other do that. And to, create an environment not to be afraid to like do something wrong. Often I don't remember where I got these from, but they're from someplace. So I am citing an author that I can't remember, but at the end of some meetings, depending on how big the project team is and what the project is, it's often really helpful to like pause 5 minutes before the end of the meeting and just reflect on what you talked about today. Because often we'll be like, oh yeah, and then we need to do this, we need to do that. And it turns out you talked all about the marketing department in the meeting, and there was no one represented. Like, marketing was not represented in this meeting where you talked about marketing. So maybe we need to get somebody from marketing into our next meeting. And then it's often nice to pause at the end of the meeting and ask if there is something we should have talked about, which we did not talk about, either because we ran out of time or because the person who, surfaced and I like the person with knowledge in that area didn't get called on, or they didn't like feel comfortable bringing up the topic. And sometimes you just need to pause and like ask this specific question, and that gives people permission to say, wow, we really need to get more information about this topic, or next time, can we have so-and-so participate in our meeting? I think is that the end of my slide? Yeah, that's it. Okay, so you can check in on the project agreements at every meeting as well. Sometimes they're good every other meeting. Meeting norms, super helpful every time. Okay, I think that's all I got. Oh, right? That wasn't an extra slide, was it? Oh, no, there was an extra slide. Sorry. In terms of communicating during the project, always have 1, max 2 key project leads at the client organization that you are going to, that person might receive all communication related to this work, and that those are going to be your primary point people, and be very clear. If others need to be copied on certain situations, like always copy so-and-so from the business office on, when you send me an invoice, always copy so-and-so from the business office. Like, that's kind of stuff to set up front. I have run into some situations where everyone in the organization feels like it's okay to just send me any email at any time with any random question about the project, even though the project is structured so that each department has a project representative who is supposed to be communicating things to their department. I like to have clear lines of communication from the project to all the stakeholders, which don't all involve me as the single point of contact. Like, I am not an authority. This project still lives with the client organization, and they need to take the lead on communicating to the entire organization about what's happening. And then what communication formats are you going to use? Do not throw 4,000 channels of communication at me, because they will get lost and I will get mad. So I like to agree in the beginning, like, what are we going to use for informal communication? Usually that's some kind of chat program that can be a, it can be Slack, it can be Teams chat, it can be Google Chat, whatever. Usually I do not love people texting me all the time, but if text is how people at that organization communicate, maybe that's what you do. Chat is usually not forwardable to another person. So usually if there's something like that needs to be documented and shared with multiple people, I like to use email for that. Where will project documentation live and who has what kind of access and on whose system? Normally and this is where you want to get those client, like what you need from the client right up front. I talk about, where will the documentation for this project live? I want it to live on the client server. So, but also I need to be able to create and remove documentation from there. Like I've gotten in trouble by keeping all the project documentation on my own Google Drive and then needing to get it over to somebody else, and that doesn't work out great. Finally, what are the business hours for this project? If you have multiple people in multiple time zones, you need to agree, like this project happens during the day between this hour and this hour. And it is, you can state as the consultant, but everybody can help together. You can state, if you communicate with me outside the business hours for this project, I will not respond to you. I will respond to you tomorrow. And then in terms of specific products, put in the contract, in the letter of agreement. If you're using any of the, Microsoft, Google, workflow management tool like Jira, Trello, any of that kind of stuff, Slack, Teams, Text Call, who is paying for that? If I add 400 people to my Slack account, that costs me money. So those are things to think about in advance. And that's all I got for real this time.
Awesome. 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 Erin brought up a lot of new things that I hadn't done in some of my meetings before. So I have definitely gleaned a ton from that section. Also some details that were in the LOA, all these good things I didn't mention earlier. I've been independent for about 2 years now, but have been in the museum industry for 25. So I definitely have the insider look on things. But now I'm kind of that outsider. So it's cool to learn from all of our friends. And part of that is having this little breakout that we're getting ready to do. And we would love it. You're gonna be kind of grouped up with a few people. Go ahead and turn your cameras on. Grouped up with a few different people to really talk about our presentation today and also your own personal experience. What were some of the aha moments that you learned today? But also what's missing? Maybe what's something that you do that other people should learn from too. So we're going to give everybody a chance to be in the breakout. It looks like we have about 20 minutes left for the call. So I would say 5 to 7 minutes. And then we'll do a debrief and a Q&A after that. And also there are a few questions in the chat as well. So presenters, just get an idea of what those are, especially because I'm not sure if the chat's going to go away when we go to the breakout. So Cashmere, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Oh, Cashmere, are you doing them or are I doing them? I have them up too.
Okay, if you want to do them, if you already have them up, I do too.
Okay.
But
Okay. Jose, because you're logged in twice, would you accept the invitation to room 2, please, not room 1? If you could do that. Okay. And then speakers who wanted to go into a room.
Well, I don't mind going in. Well, Welcome back, everybody. I hope your conversation was as productive and enlightening as ours was. I had some great friends with me in my room. If anybody wants to share out, we have 7 minutes. Maybe just go ahead and put it in the chat. Anything that you may have gotten in your breakout that was really, really awesome, an aha moment, maybe something that you use in your business that we didn't mention already. Go ahead and put that in the chat while I give you a little advertisement for next month. Next month, we're doing a continuation of this session. So again, we know that it's super duper important to have those clear partnership responsibilities. And this session really was just about getting started with your partnership and client consultant teams. Whereas next month is going to be all about keeping on track and keeping going. I hinted to it a little bit earlier that we're going to be talking about midpoint and final evaluations. We're also going to be talking things like change orders and, stuff like that that kind of happens in the process. So not just the relationship and your project, but also the bigger picture ones of what if this project is going off the rails with expenses? What if this project is going off the rails communication wise? So we're going to be talking about a lot of those things. Erin and I are going to partner up, and in my breakout, I had a couple other folks that might want to chime in. So that's going to be awesome too. Let's see. One of the comments over here, what happens when the leadership at the organization changes? Ooh, those were other conversations that were happening in the breakout. The hiring organization is the leader of the project and the consultant is the leader of the process. Ooh, what happens if something changes part way? And how does the fee change? Ooh, that's going to be part of next month. We'll make sure that we take that. Are there any results tied to the deliverables? What are the measures of success? Ooh, these are all really, really good things. Presenters, do you have anything to chime in with in regards to those questions or feedback?
I have one thing. I'm working on a project now where 100% of this client staff assigned to the project changed during the first 12 months of its 18-month project, so that I'm the person with the most organizational knowledge about the project, but I'm not part of the organization. It's very awkward. Still working out what to do about that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the other questions that came up, Erin, since you're there and ready to chat, the question was, I wonder what you, Erin, or anyone else thinks about coming in as the consultant and setting some of the norms yourself if you've been called in to make some changes in a situation that's not working with the existing culture. Does that fit to your social norms?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you can strongly suggest that some things be norms or just be like, I didn't hear anybody mention this, but I'm adding it to the list. I still find it much more effective to have these crowdsourced norms from the group. Even when stuff is broken at the organization, usually people suggest things that they wish they were experiencing in meetings. Like, I wish people would stop interrupting me. I wish there was a way that we all understood to know how to get the floor in this meeting. How can I be heard is usually one of the big complaints. Yes,
Good.
norms as aspirations.
Yes, good. All right, I know that Cashmere has some more announcements before us before we log off today. So thank you so much for your help and all the presenters.
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming today again as we wrap up here. We can drop all of our emails in the chat. So if you want to reach out to us directly, you can do that. But you can also follow us online, follow this QR code to go to our website, or follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram. Jen's going to talk about some other ways to get involved as well.
Thanks for coming in, everybody. It was a good lunchtime convo.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can follow this survey at the end to let us know how we did. And we also have some upcoming sessions as well. March 11th is our part 2, so look for that. We also have IMPs Connect, self-care for museum professionals coming April 2nd, and some in-person meetups as well. So check out those on our website. And that's it.